a lot of people are veering much more into trend-based ideas, and there are very loose interpretations on a lot of these trend ideas, right? Whether they are shags, mullets, right? All sorts of different things that sometimes we forget to focus on the basics, okay? So the last time that I actually did a hair brain presentation, we did a long bob length that was extremely layered, that had a lot of graduation opening the face up. So it was a shag interpretation of a bob, because I a lot of times see shags and then I see just one length bob, so I thought it'd be cool to marry those two ideas together. But with my awesome model Reagan's hair, we were talking about doing something to just kind of open things up and just give it more movement without having to reinvent the wheel completely. And I think one of the things we all forget to do is to look at all the tools of the trade, right? So today we're going to focus on a razor shape. So important notes with razor cutting. Less is more. You don't want to be super aggressive with your technique, because the more you scrape down, the more aggressively your stroke is going to affect the hair and cause the hair to frizz and expand. And a single blade that doesn't have a guard is going to be your best tool for the trade, okay? I recommend everybody practicing with a guarded blade, maybe a feather razor or something like that, but you know, the single blade with no guard is the sharpest possible blade that gives you the cleanest line without all the hair getting trapped in the actual guard teeth themselves, okay? So Reagan's hair, we're not trying to necessarily go up an insane amount on the length. I like where this sits, but I think with the last shape cut, the back is too heavy, and so with the inspiration that her and I were talking about, we want a little bit more of an A-line feeling, right? And she also has fine hair, and so with fine hair, it's really easy for it to fall flat. And you can really open that up a lot with various razor techniques that I'm going to show you today. So the first thing we've done is we've isolated out the front from the back at the overall line of indentation, right? So here's your parietal ridge, which separates the top from the bottom by the center round of the head. And the parietal ridge is essentially the flat behind the ears right in front of the mastoid that separates the front of the head from the back of the head. And then she has the center part, so we found that. And now we're just gonna simply work down from there. So it's really important for you to, no matter how far over to the side the part is, you want to start from the crown and work from the crown down so that hair can distribute evenly from both sides of the crown, okay? So I'm going to take my comb, drag it straight down the center. And one of the things that I always tell my students in Van Michael's training program is you're trying to, as easily as possible, find a section of hair. Don't do this kind of like, you know, technique where the comb isn't very steady in your hand. If you can, make it so the comb is parallel in your hand, place the flat of the back parallel to the head, steady with your thumb, and just drag straight down like that. And then you have a much cleaner section line, okay? Super simple. And even though it seems like we all know how to section, sometimes we see people come into our training programs and into our salons that don't really seem to know how to section well. And sectioning is super important because clean sections make the roadmap to your haircut. And if you don't have clean sections to follow, how are you going to follow your haircut easily, okay? So now we're going to start with a more A-line shape with my internal sectioning, okay? And I'll explain that in a second. So I'm going to comb this away and then hold my hair with my comb so I can comb in right behind that and clip that out of the way, okay? Important to use your comb when you're sectioning because this is going to stay open during the duration of my haircut. Wide teeth, okay? Starting in the center and work my way diagonally down, okay? And if you want to, while you're learning how to cut hair, if you want to, you can close it every time, but I try to be as efficient as possible. And I know that when I'm in the salon and I'm trying to go through a haircut efficiently and beautifully in 45 minutes. The more time I take to do this kind of stuff or turn my blow dryer off and set it down, the less time I have to really perfect my work, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and use these two guys to really keep the front out of the way. Also, I know something that Dan and I have talked about a lot on the road is that these simple flat clips, you can get them, there's various sites, I believe that, does Hairbrain?
I think Hairbrain does actually, yeah.
So there are lots of places you got these, but the flat, simple ones that don't leave divots in the hair are my favorite hair cutting clips. And they're usually more inexpensive. So when you lose them because you're going around from salon to salon to salon doing these demos, it doesn't break your heart when you don't have them anymore. Okay, so we're gonna start in the center of my shape, okay? So we're trying to create more of an A-line. So my section being more angled is important because as you work to the outside of your shape, you wanna create a little bit more length so that you don't end up bouncing up and losing your overall A-line, okay? And real quick, I'm gonna get a water bottle.
Yeah, I think one thing that's really important about that, what you're saying is, so whenever you're cutting with a razor, you're cutting on the inside of your hand versus the outside of your hand versus the inside of your hand like you do with a scissor. So you're gonna have more tension, so you're gonna have more of a jump. And where hair tends to round up naturally because of the roundness of the head, if you're trying to create an A-line shape, you have to almost exaggerate more with that razor because it's going to round up because of the amount of tension you're using.
Absolutely. So with that being said, as my stroke works outward, I'm literally going to almost kind of like turn my wrist inward to preserve that length. I'll show you what I mean. That's a great trick that I actually learned from Gerard when Gerard came and taught a razor class years ago. So I'm working with the heel of my blade, okay? And I'm working with fine strokes. Trying to create a lot of tension. Actually, wait, opposite. There we go, that's what I mean. All right, so I'm working towards myself. And when you're working to create your guide, it's okay if you really take your time and establish a clean guide with multiple strokes, right?
So we've got people all over the world watching this right now. We've been getting quite a few people from France that have been logging in. Yeah, a couple of them were actually asking me to translate. I can't quite translate to French, but if you do ask me any questions, I can read French pretty proficiently. But then we've got all over the place. A couple of people were asking where we are. We're here in Atlanta, Georgia right now. This is Van Michael Salons with Hairbrained, and we're actually at our East Cobb location right now, which is the Marietta area of Georgia, which is just outside of Atlanta. We're just kind of in a little suburb area. We actually have 8 locations here throughout the city, and this is one of our salons this one's been open for 11 years now, and we just did a little bit of renovating to it. So we thought the nice white salon would be good for this demo. And you can see Sean is working with a razor today on a beautiful bob that he's creating. And really all he's been doing so far to catch everybody up is he's done some A-line sectioning to maintain some length towards the front, and he's taking off a good bit of length and a good bit of weight in the nape. We've got people coming in from Toronto. We've got people, all the way from the Middle East and from India, all over the place logging on right now. This is great.
Which is really cool, and I think that that's something that Hairbrained is really amazing with, is bringing people together that are all into their craft, right? Because hair is universal. Everyone's got hair, and there are really, a million things you can do with it. So it's always good to stay inspired by your craft. And it doesn't matter if you're from, Iran, if you're from France, if you're from Finland, all hair is to some extent pretty similar, right?
Yeah, we've got a lot of the U.S. now logging on. We've got some Denver, we've got Puerto Rico, but now we've got Australia as well. It's great to see everybody from all over the world.
Okay, so I'm gonna just kind of clean this left side up just a little bit. Okay.
And you can see Sean's really moving that blade quite a bit. Even though he's not creating an extremely textured line, he's moving the blade with small strokes, but quite proficiently and very moving very quickly so that you can move through the hair without pulling on the hair.
Right. So the easiest way that I would describe efficient razor technique to somebody would be if you were trying to kind of create a sketch, like a sketch, right? You don't want to bear it down, because whenever you bear it down, your pencil lines, your pen lines are really harsh, right? But when you leave your sketch, if you're using a pencil to sketch, you're going to be a little bit lighter with your stroke, right? Because you want things to be a little bit softer and a little bit more feathery, so you can go back later and refine it. But in this case, we're doing the same thing because we want the feathery stroke to create a softer shape overall, even though we're creating a hard shape in a sense, okay?
We've got some people from Indiana, Alabama, Texas, California, all over the place, Mexico. We've got people just logging in like crazy right now, and we're really happy to see everybody. We're here at Van Michael Salons in Atlanta, Georgia, and Sean Bruno here is doing a razored bob so far. We're really just a couple of sections in, but you can see now on his second line, he's really opened up a little bit more, which is going to create a little more graduation because it's going to add a little bit more texture to the hair, so the hair is going to jump more.
Absolutely. So I'll show you guys in a second how, even though, as Daniel just said, I'm opening my stroke up a little bit more, I'm also only opening it up so much because I still want my line to be clean, right? So if you look at what that looks like, you can see that there's softness in my shape internally, but there's still a definite line there, okay? And I always find that as a right-handed cutter, it's really easy for me to gain too much length on my right side. So I'm going to work a little bit more into the actual front of the face, okay?
And you can see he's using the fine teeth of the comb, and he's really combing this hair very tightly because you do want quite a bit of tension whenever you're cutting with a razor. I'd mentioned before, you're cutting on the outside of your hand versus the inside of your hand when you're using a scissor. And so when you're doing this, you need to have consistent tension. So the best way to have consistent tension is to use the finer teeth of the comb. So he's combing back and forth quite a bit, and he's really moving the blade. You can see he's just doing a little detail work there, but he's making sure everything is very exact, even though the whole idea of a razor is to have a little more imperfect of an effect. It's going to be a little more movement to the hair versus a real solid line with a scissor.
Exactly. So even saturation also is really, really important when you're doing a razored shape, right? However saturated the hair is when you start it out is how saturated you want it to be through the entire duration of the haircut, okay? So I'm going to kind of refine the center just a little bit before I move on to the section above. So see, what I tend to do is I'll kind of pull to right past my initial guide because I know that I'm going to cut a little bit of my guide with every stroke, right? So you don't want to necessarily, it's not like traditional scissor hair cutting where you have to comb right to your guide and cut, boom, left to right or right to left, right? You want to pull to where your guide is almost becoming slightly less visible, and then it work to there because you know that if you don't, you're going to overcut the whole time. Okay.
Yeah, it's funny, like if you were to try to say you were trying to create a graduation into layering, sometimes you would do that where you would cut past your guide so that it creates that jump. But if you're trying to keep an A-line shape like so, you'd end up with a gap if you cut right to the guide.
Absolutely. And it's all about, again, practice. I mean, the amount of time that I spent practicing on a mannequin before I cut someone's hair with a razor is kind of hilarious because it was so intimidating to me. When I was in hair school, my teachers weren't comfortable teaching it, so we spent less time on it. I mean, we learned how to do some things with a razor because it was obligatory with the curriculum, but it's intimidating for people. So when you're working at home and you're excited about something new, practice on yourself because you can really do a lot of damage if you don't know what you're doing, and then you can also cut yourself mercilessly. So there's that. All right, so I'm working a little bit more open now, okay? Still working with the heel of my blade.
So I got a couple of people asking about timing, and one of the questions was, how long does it take to cut a full bob with the razor? And I'll actually say this. I mean, Sean, you book on the 45-minute for a haircut, right? Mm-hmm. I'll say this. It takes me a little bit longer to cut a bob or any kind of a shape with a razor while it's wet, exactly. But generally speaking, there's very little detail work that I do once it's dry. Now, I'm a big proponent I like to cut with a razor when it's wet. It's very rare you'll see me do any razoring when it's dry. So usually what I try to do is I try to perfect it as much as possible while it's wet. And it probably takes me a good 25-30 minutes of wet cutting with a razor to create a good bob shape. And then what I find, though, is once it's dry, I'll go through with my scissors just to do a little refining, and it's very little that I do. I mean, my refining with a scissor when it's dry is, maybe a minute or two. It's no time at all. So when I do a razor cut, I book exactly the same as I do for a scissor cut. Do you do the same?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's just the case with everything, right? I mean, I have clients say, how much do you charge for, what kind of booking do you do for children, or what do you charge for children? I just say, this is how much my time costs. Whether it's with a razor, or it's with scissors, or it's with a 5-year-old, or it's with a grumpy 50-year-old husband who just doesn't want to have his hair butchered anymore. It doesn't matter. Like, you should just kind of try to take the same amount of time for every person and just decide where you care to put your time during that service. Okay, so here's my cross check. So what I'll do is I'll actually leave the hair flat to my fingers and then just create a really light, parallel to the grain of the hair, cut like so, right?
And what he's doing there is exactly what I was talking about, refining it while it's wet versus going through and having to do that when it's dry. Those are little things that you could leave alone, and when it's dry, you would see, I just need to do a little snip here, a little snip there, and you can do that. But I personally feel like doing it when it's wet gives it a little bit more of that razored effect rather than going in with the scissors so much when it's afterwards when it's dry.
Absolutely, because the more work you do with your scissors, the less of a razored effect you have in the end. Okay, so I'm cross-checking. So I've gained a touch more length on my right, which again, I'm a right-handed cutter, so I don't mind gaining a little bit of length because I can always come in here and take it off. And as I work towards the outside of my shape, my stroke is closing down a little bit more. So I want you guys to see that, right? So my stroke is a little bit close and a little bit more precise, and then a little bit more open on the inside.
Yeah, so you're keeping a little bit more of a solid line as the hair
and I'm trying to prevent it from jumping up too much because hairlines are crazy in the corners. Plus, when you change the density between the corner of the hairline and the mastoid and the ear, we're talking about a huge loss in weight, right? So you need to keep more length so that the weight can actually work in your favor. The second you take it shorter, this jump in density is going to cause this line to become this line really quickly, okay? So now something I'll do, Reagan's got a nice amount of hair, so what I'm going to do is really lightly at this point in the haircut, because I'm not opening my stroke up too much, but I'm really lightly going to, right parallel to the actual grain of the hair, I'm going to really lightly notch through a little bit of weight out, okay? So a little bit more in the center, but still nothing crazy. Right? It just kind of softens how it lays. It creates more of a bevel where there's a large amount of hair that I'm trying to get rid of. And I'll do the same thing here, except I'll work my way inside and to the outside, right? So here, cutting ear before hair, and then I work my way.
I like that, cutting air before hair. It is so true. You need to make sure that the blade is moving before you go into the hair when you're using that kind of slicing technique. That way you don't pull on the hair and take a big chunk out.
Absolutely.
Somebody had mentioned that they love cutting with a razor but wouldn't do it with every haircut. By no means would I recommend using a razor on every single person. In our salons at Van Michael, basically, our training program starts off with scissors, and that's what we really train people on at the very beginning, is learning to do everything with just a straight scissor. We have our own scissor company, Van Michael Scissors, and we feel like you need to know that to start off your craft. But then we're really big on using all tools. We even use clippers for, and we use razors for fading, things along those lines. We do razor cutting, we do texturizing shears, we do every tool there is, we're a big proponent of. But the big thing with myself, and I know Sean's this way as well, is we really feel like you need to master it with just a scissor first. It's kind of like learning to crawl before you walk, before you run. You need to learn one tool and then add more to it once you understand shape, technique. One thing that I heard, I've taken a class before with Gerard and DJ Muldoon. It's called a scissor versus a razor. And all of the things that DJ talks about in that class, the real classic dynamics of cutting hair, Gerard says you need to know all of those before you even pick up the razor, because the razor shape needs to be second nature to you before you're actually using a new tool. And I'm a huge proponent for that as well, where, hey, yeah, a razor gives an amazing effect. I love razored looks. I do razor cuts in the salon all the time. I love clippered looks. I think clippered cuts are amazing right now also. But my big thing is I wanted to know how to do everything with a scissor before I brought in the other tools of the trade.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think so. I work at the location of Van Michael that's more centrally located in the city. And, I actually have a lot of chef clients. And one of the things that my chef clients and I have talked about is, when they were learning how to cook, they didn't immediately start out learning how to cook these kind of really trendy gastro recipes where you're deconstructing the ceviche and turning it into, dehydrated elements on a plate. They started out probably working at, Ryan's Steakhouse preparing a Salisbury steak. And there's just something to be said for, again, understanding the basics, whether you're cooking, whether you're doing art, walking before you start running. Makes a huge difference. So again, Reagan's head is tilted a little bit for me because I want the hair to be a little bit more graduated in the back. And so when you're working with a razor, it's really easy to kind of follow the old rules and not do things to help yourself. So in tilting, it creates a little bit more of a natural graduation for me. And as I'm working up the head, my stroke is opening up, right, top to bottom, and getting a little bit more aggressive.
So a couple of things coming in, a couple questions. One actually was a comment about how good Reagan is being about staying still, how this young lady watching says that she absolutely loves it when somebody will sit still.
Because she knows what will happen if she moves.
Yeah, exactly. But then other things, other couple of questions that were in, is that somebody was wondering about a razor with people who are losing their hair. That is something that I would say that's a iffy situation right there, because in some ways it's probably not a great idea, because if you have a lot of thinning of the hair or hair that's shedding, you're going to all of a sudden be getting natural texture in the hair on its own. So I'd probably cut a lot cleaner. Somebody had also said, do you recommend any products for that? We actually, particularly in our salons, have about 3 different things that we recommend our clients when they start, if they're losing hair for one reason or another. The biggest thing that we do is Veda has an Invati line, which is designed, it's very similar to like a Nioxin and a Rogaine kind of step, where it's topical solutions. Then also there's 2 other things that I'm a big proponent for. One is a product called Nutrafol, which is a pill that you take every day that helps basically stop the DHTs so that your hair doesn't shed as much. And then one thing that I started taking personally because of my joints is I started taking, it's called the Glow. It's Isogenics collagen. And collagen is great for hair loss as well. I didn't realize that. That's not the reason I got onto it. But what I have found is my hair grows really fast and my nails grow really fast ever since I've been taking it. So yeah, definitely there's a lot of things that can help with thinning hair nowadays, as well as just making sure that you cut the hair usually a little bit shorter and a little bit more graduated so that the hair is building up weight is my biggest proponent for thinning hair. And generally speaking, not a lot of texturizing. So if you do want to use a razor on someone who's been shedding a lot, extremely small strokes. Basically the opposite of what Sean's doing right now, more along the lines of what he was doing when he was setting in his guideline.
So you can see my stroke being much more open gives you that internal texture, right? If you're texturizing through a really blunt cut dry shape, let's say I cut a flat plane down here and a flat plane internally, so right, like a one length with a square layer, and it was a really blunt flat plane. I would want to go through with my scissors and seamlessly texturize in, usually about a half an inch to an inch in, to give it softness and movement. That texture is about 3/4 of an inch, right? So it just does the job for you, which is where when Daniel
Two birds, one stone.
That's right. So when Daniel and I were talking earlier, you know, you booked the same amount of time because I know that with my wet technique, I have less work to do once the shape is complete, okay? Closing my stroke as I'm working towards the corner, okay?
Yeah, you can see it's gotten a little bit tighter there, how it's not nearly as much texture when you get down towards the hairline.
Okay, and again, I'm a little bit higher up on the head, so now I'm going to go through and do that thing we did earlier where we're going to notch out a little bit more of the weight internally, right? And I'm not going all the way up to the roots. I'm going more from the mid shaft down because I really want there to be a lot of softness and texture throughout the haircut. So as you're working, you notch quite a bit more out of the center, right?
And it's funny, so, you know, I'm looking at this in two different ways, through the camera and then also just here in real life. The camera, because of the lighting on the wet hair, just really doesn't give the justice to how much texture has happened internally in this shape. It is really looks beautiful the way that it's moving.
And look, so the way that we're also elevating, we can see that we actually have natural graduation happening, right?
Absolutely.
And that's something that just happens organically with this technique, okay? So I'm only gonna notch a tiny little bit out of the corner, right? Just enough to where it's not so blunt in contrast to everything else, okay? And the second that we move this around, look, it has this really nice internal collapse through here and this really beautiful wispiness at the corners already, right? And with the way that we're preserving our length, it looks like it's going to just naturally work into the front length, which is what we want anyways. So we got about 2 more sections up in the top. With a razor, you don't want to handle too much hair at one point in time because then your blade gets overwhelmed and it gets dull and it also doesn't cut as efficiently. So I'm still going to be pretty diligent with my sectioning, okay?
One thing I always like to let people know is, so when I cut hair with the scissors, if I'm cutting, say, like a graduated bob, I'm using really small, usually 1/4 inch subsections. With a razor, I use a little bit larger, maybe a 1/2 inch subsection, but never any bigger than that. Right. There's this like sweet spot that you need, because if it's too fine of layer or too fine of sections, you end up not having any resistance to cut. But then at the same time, if you use too big, just like you said, it just drags through and it really does not create a pretty effect at all. It actually, you can kind of feel it hurting the client.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'm really up almost to the crown, so I'm going to lean the head down a little bit further so that I can still elevate the hair lower, but have the head actually work for me, and I can actually create graduation still with my stroke being more open. Okay?
There's a gentleman named Mark that said that clients are constantly getting the names of these haircuts wrong, and you're absolutely right. Here's something, I've been doing doing hair for quite a while. I literally grew up in a salon, so I've been in the hair industry for over 40 years at this point, and I will tell you this: they will never get it right. The clients can never get terminology correct. I have a client named Gail who's been coming to me every week for me to do her hair for the last 21 years now, and Gail cannot get the word bob correct. She thinks that a bob means layers. So I mean, you know, there's no way I'm going to be able to you could ever think that clients are going to get it right. So yeah, we're really big on when they do say that they want, you know, a layered bob or a graduated bob or a textured bob or whatever they say that they want. I'm a big proponent for letting them know that they are that we're not that to show them a picture, because they really have no way of knowing exactly what a bob really is, or a graduated bob, or any of the terminology. They always get it incorrect.
Right, and when people show their lack of awareness, I kind of just play with them and have fun with it. You know, you don't want to make them feel dumb, but you kind of just say like, well, you know, that's not quite true, and we're going to work through this. We're going to figure out what you want. We're going to stop talking in terms of words, and we're going to look at pictures, and we're going to eliminate all confusion, because you're talking about how you want it to be stacked, but then you're telling me you don't like it to be short in the back.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I mean, it definitely does not. The terminology is not the easiest to work with clients. My stepmother, I always joke around with that. She has a million adjectives for how she wants her haircut at all times, and I've found that I just have to show her pictures, because the pictures are worth 1,000 words.
That's right.
So it looks like you're taking a good bit of weight out right there in the back of Reagan's hair.
Yep.
And it looks like you're almost to your pre-sectioned panel. It looks like you broke it into front and back, and looks like you got one more section left?
About that, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as we're working around, right, there's little hairs, but you can see, right, we have a beautiful, soft A-line shape that's formed, and it formed without scissors.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
I mean, it really does. I mean, you can see the texture in there, but it is a very clean shape.
Thank you, Daniel. It does feel good to still cut hair cleanly. Doesn't matter how long you've been doing it. You can cut a haircut a million times, and when you still see it turn out nicely, especially when it's, you know, I don't know, being streamed to people that could very easily critique your haircut for you, it's kind of nice. I think that's the important thing about teaching, is that, I mean, I've been teaching for Van Michael for like...
At least 10, 12 years,
12
right?
Years. Yeah, 12 years, because I hadn't had my first child yet. So yeah, 12 years. So, and in that time, I've learned how little I really know, and how much I benefit from working with these students every week. I mean, it really does make me so much better than just sheer, you know, work behind the chair, no pun intended. Yeah, I think it's really important to like always focus on the basic educational element of what you do.
Yeah, I will say this. I completely agree with that 150%. I know that for myself, teaching has been the greatest thing, because it keeps me in check. It makes me do like a self-check of like, hey, if I'm telling people to do something, and I would tell people to cut cleanly, or to section properly, or to use proper tension, to keep the hair consistently damp, you know, I make sure that when I'm behind the chair, that I'm doing the same thing, that I'm, you know, quote unquote, you know, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. So I really find that teaching has been the best thing for me to, you know, really stay good at what I do and not burn out. And, you know, I've been with Van Michael now for 22 years. So, I mean, it really does, it's great to pass on the knowledge that you have, because it really does help, it helps you as well as helping somebody else.
Absolutely, and I think so, right, you said 22 years. I forget that well, we know that you're not really old enough to have worked here for 22 years. We know that I'm not old enough to have worked here for 16 years.
Right.
But the important thing with that is to remember that, like, this industry has a super high burnout statistic. And I think it's because it's easy for people to feel less inspired. And what I tell students in the salon, every time they tell me that, like, again, class is frustrating, maybe assisting is frustrating, hair school was long on them, is the truth is, any job, when you have to go every day and go and do work for other people to make money, is less fun. So it's about finding ways to inspire yourself and to find the fun in it when it does kind of become about earning an income. And hair is an amazing job. I love it. I'm stoked to be at the salon every day, but I also don't mind leaving every day. And the important thing with that is to know that, like, you know, whether it's teaching, whether it's going and taking continuing education, that, you know, Hairbrain offers, Aveda offers some amazing courses, R&Co offers, you know, there are great routes you can take to stay inspired so that you don't just get burned out from hearing people complain about, you know, they don't realize that your life has been affected by COVID as well, but all they want to do is complain to you about how difficult it is now that they have to wear masks when they're in the carpool line, you know? So you have to do what you have to do to stay inspired. Okay, so here's the thing. We don't mind there being some tension, and I'm over-directing it back. So what I'm gonna do is, rather than take the traditional approach of a bob, where we would be working, we will close ours for this. So, right, if I were cutting a one-length bob completely, cleanly, like I wanted one of my old instructors to check it, what I would do is I'd have the head upright. I would comb the hair really to natural fall. I would use my wide teeth. I would literally not even comb aggressively at the roots. I would glide past and tap the ears to eliminate all tension, and then they cut below my line, right? That's not what we're doing right now. We want there to be over direction. We want there to be tension, but we also want it to flow. So I'm going to use my wide teeth, or my fine teeth, to bring it back into my shape, okay? Here's my corner. There's my guide, okay? So I'm gonna use a small stroke to connect into that. And I'm gonna, again, see I'm kind of turning my fingers towards my body to make sure that I'm gaining that length, right? When you turn, as a right-handed person, right, if I turn inward, I'm causing this to gain a little bit more length, the outside of my shape, right? Inside of my knuckles, outside of my shape. I'll do that again. Okay? And also, important to note, I'm not going, so I am actually stopping on the tips of my finger, but I'm not going hard because, again, I'm trying to address this like I would be painting a watercolor painting. So I stop short. This is also probably calloused from 16 years, but whatever.
Well, the other thing about it that people don't realize is when cutting with a razor, if you're very light with your stroke, the way that you've been, almost like you said, sketching the hair, you don't cut yourself. You know, you just tap, you basically tap your fingers from time to time, and you may get a little nick here and there, but if you're really grabbing at the hair, pushing really hard, that is where you can really tend to cut yourself, which I've done both. I've definitely done both.
Yeah, the last time that Daniel and I actually did, so Daniel and I did a web stream, a razor technique web stream for all the Aveda Institutes. I don't know, what was that, like 4 months ago, 5 months ago, maybe 6, maybe it was 2 years ago, I don't know. But we, when I practiced in my kitchen because I still practice to know that I'm doing what I'm properly doing. And I did the whole haircut perfectly, and then I cut the crap out of myself and I was cleaning up. Literally like making sure everything was good, and I'm just being really careless, and I just grazed myself before I put it away. And so I did the whole haircut, and then I cut myself. And I felt so foolish, and my kids honestly thought that I needed to go to the hospital. All right, so here we go. So same thing, right? I'm gonna turn the opposite way, okay? Because I'm trying to preserve more length this way instead of this way, okay? So we're combing, fine teeth.
So actually one of our friends who works at our Midtown location, Sue, she just asked, are you moving your fingers or your wrist? Technically, it's a little bit of both, but more your fingers than your wrist when you're doing it. Right. Think about just as if you were sketching a pencil.
Exactly.
Sketching with a pencil, I'm sorry, yeah.
So, right, so, all right. This isn't going to be weird. I'm going to sketch on you. Okay. So, I'll let you check. Right, so if I were doing a sketch, because I actually do art stuff, right? So if I were doing a sketch, this is literally how I would approach it, right? So there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of wrist motion just to keep it a little bit more natural. But essentially, it's these 3 fingers that are creating my overall stroke, right? And that being said, it's not scraping down like this. It's also not like, I know there are people that hold their pencils like this, right? It's literally, that's proper art school form.
Yeah.
Simple as it gets, right? And this is literally no different.
It's just an extension of your,
the exact same thing. And the reason that I like the razor so much is because when Daniel first started to talk about razor techniques internally in our company, and then Gerard was also still with Aveda, and he was talking about razor techniques, They said it's just like sketching. And because I grew up in art, it made sense to me. It just works. So look, all we did was we connected point A to point B, and we have this really natural, nice transition, okay?
What's amazing to me also knowing Reagan, and you don't really see it because she's got a mask on, but she has really good cheekbones and she has a really good smile. And the challenge,
But you'll never know.
Yeah, right. But you'll never see it with the mask on. But her hair before was cut very pretty, but it was very square. And so it didn't really do anything for her cheekbones. It actually, in some ways, made her cheekbones look wider instead of more angular. And I can tell immediately that by keeping this length in the front and taking this up in the back, it's going to be a lot more flattering on her face.
Right, exactly.
That's one thing that, whether you're using a razor, whether you're using a scissor, whatever you're doing, that needs to be in your consultation also. You need to start looking at people as an overall image and not just a haircut.
Right.
Because a lot of times people are more concerned about what they're doing technically and not what they're doing as far as visually with the client. And I am a big proponent for marrying the two, where you have actually, yes, this is a technically precise haircut. This is perfectly done, but I also feel like it has to match the person.
Totally. So what I was trying to show you guys real quick is, here's the guide from the back, here's my length on the side. So you see we have a definite flowing line. It works, okay? And a lot of it is just basic triangular technique. If we were cutting a triangular bob in the salon, right? That's what we're doing. We're over-directing back to have physics work in our favor to push the shape forward, okay? And it's the same overall principles, which I know because I was instructed technically to cut with scissors, right? It's the same, they're the same principles. I can't stress enough how important it is, because nowadays, and I don't mean to sound like I don't care about pursuing new education. I think it's amazing that everyone is getting into their own educational platforms, but what people are forgetting when they're coming out of hair school is that some of these platforms are kind of like they're like jumping ahead of their own skill set, right? These people that are developing their own training platforms are really, really well trained themselves, and sometimes it doesn't translate through to a student who's just gotten out of hair school, right? So we have to remember to start from the bottom, right? You use basic bricks and you mortar them to build a house that then you can paint and decorate. Okay, so working back again, my triangular graduation line is now, there's my guide. Sorry.
No, you're perfect. You're perfect.
So close stroke, butt of my blade.
Yeah, and if you think about this, hair has different densities throughout the head. So in the center back, right around that crown area and her occipital bone, Reagan's hair is drastically denser than that front hairline. I mean, you can see her front hairline is not nearly as thick as this hair in the back. So you can see the notching that he's taking out, the texturizing, that weight removal. It's significantly more back towards the back of the head than he is at the front hairline.
I'm literally just very lightly creating internal movement through here so that I don't have all and then nothing, right? Okay, so now I will close my blade to make sure that I'm not going to cut her or myself, and I'll check for balance. Okay, pull equidistantly from both sides of the head, pull it down, pull towards the center, and then we know we have established balance. Okay, so now I'm running out of hair to cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the front of the shape in larger sections, because I still want to create a little bit more of an open feeling through here using my razor as well, okay? And I'm actually gonna just establish one large section to isolate the top out now. Working smarter, not harder, as Greg would say. All right, here we go. Flip it out of the way. And then I'm still spraying. It doesn't matter that I was talking about it 15 minutes ago. I'm spraying throughout the entire shape because The same rules apply from start to finish. I want even saturation, so my razor can cut through the hair the same at the nape as it does at the front hairline, okay? One time, oh, we're good.
And you can see how that hair is just coming straight off of the head? That's creating that natural graduation as well. You know, you don't necessarily, I think a lot of people, they think that you have to cut graduation vertically with a 45 to 70 degree finger angle. Whereas if you think about the head shape, it's naturally graduated because of the occipital bone. And if you just follow the head and just elevate naturally, you're going to create really nice external and internal graduation.
That's right. I mean, basic hair cutting theory, graduation is literally any hair cut above 1 degree and below 89 degrees. So you could elevate the hair this high off the head and it would still be graduation. You can elevate the hair this high off the head and just basically hold it out with your fingers using tension, and it's graduation. It's all the same, okay?
The one nice thing I like about the technique that you're doing, and I do this in the salon a lot, is that I find that because the front hairline is finer than the back, using the natural graduation, you tend to be, because the head flattens out on the sides, you tend to have lower elevation towards the front hairline, higher in the back, and it makes just a really nice, clean flow from front to back and from back to front of where you have more graduation in the back, less in the front, but it creates such a nice balance for the density of hair.
Right, exactly. So everyone complains about how heavy hair is right behind the ears. So now that I'm closer to the top, I am going to go through and notch that out a little bit more. Because again, that's the number one complaint I hear from people that have bobs, is that when they push their hair around or tuck it back, as we tend to do, it's really heavy behind the ears. So now that I've left it so much weight, that's a really dense line. So we're going to go through with a more open stroke, but still really controlled. I mean, again, my blade is literally completely perpendicular to my finger line, okay? So it's literally parallel to the grain of the hair. So even though I'm going a little bit more hog wild in theory, I'm really not taking as much hair out as I could be, because when I comb through it, I still have a definite line, but I have all of this hair that I just took out, okay? And then on the top, I'm gonna do something a little bit more out of the box with this to create a really kind of a universal part line, if you will, right? So one of the big issues that people tend to have with center parts is that when they're cut perfectly on a center part, if the hair moves around in different directions, it tends to have long pieces go over their part line, right? Or fall from one side to the other side, right? So what we're gonna do is I'm going to take my center part, or my center section, okay? And then I'm going to lean. I'm going to be gentle with this. Ooh, okay. So, can you head back for me, please? So she's going to lean her head back a little bit more. And then what we're going to do is really lightly, right? So see how we have, this is almost like a cross check. We have a little bit of overhang here with my internal line, right? Hold my hand out so you can see. Yep. Okay. So what we're going to do is using fine teeth and leaning her head back, I'm going to gather the hair, and then with a more open stroke, just create a little bit of a softer connection point between left side and right side, okay? Again, same exact thing. So with her head leaning back towards me, this is almost layering, because it's the opposite of the head leaning down. The head is leaning back towards me, which puts the elevation at a higher point. So the layering of the crown is preventing me from having anything that's heavy or bulbous overhanging my really nicely layered and graduated shape. Okay, then I'm gonna notch out that weight. And then when we look at what that looks like, see that just like beautifully collapses in the bottom of the shape? It's just so So much cleaner to work with. And this is, yeah, nothing. Okay, cool. So, safety first. Now I'm going to reestablish her center part line. And we talked about something that accents her cheekbones. So the easiest way to accent cheekbones is by opening up the face, right? Because whether you use makeup contour or a filter on a phone, we always want to accent cheekbones. I usually try to accent my cheekbones by just hiding them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want my cheekbones to offend anyone. Speaking of cheekbones, there was an amazing Val Kilmer documentary I just watched. Best cheekbones of the 90s. Oh, great cheekbones. All right, so I wanted to be a little bit shorter, okay? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna kind of play off of this length and then work with a little bit of graduation, angling this way and angling this way, because my V will create a shorter internal shape that'll still allow me to keep all of my outline, okay? All right, tilt your head down for me, please. Thank you. So, hair is really evenly saturated. I'm gonna gather it tightly in my hands, and then again. Right? Maybe just a little bit more. So when we look at where that falls, see that's a little bit more around the actual corner of the jawline. Love that, okay? Nice and clean finger, no cuts, no blood.
Don't jinx yourself.
Be quiet, Danny. This is from last week. This is called I was ready to get out of the salon and I went too fast before I left. Because I cut past my second knuckle. All right, stand right here. Okay, so I'm combing everything. So my angle lines are, again, triangular, right? I want to create a short to long to create openness and preserve length. So I'm combing parallel to my section line, and my roots are coming perpendicular off of that. And then again, super simple. And you can tell from when she got it cut last that the shape was cut more flat across the front, right? So it wasn't going to push nicely, because when a shape is cut flat across the front, you have to really manipulate it to get it to open up, or take it short enough where it opens up. So in this, it's going to create this arc frame, okay? Probably gonna have about two more sections before I run out of hair. All right, cool. We're open stroke because I'm working higher up on the head. See? Control, okay? Lean down for me, please. Cool. And she's going to lean down to create a little bit more soft internal graduation. Okay, so. And then really lightly notch this to preserve the length, but eliminate the heavy weight that would otherwise frame around the face heavily. Okay. And I'm gonna just kind of take one big section because I know I'm about to run out of hair. Yep, cool. So at this point, I'm basically just cross-checking over my line. Okay. Define, but still soft. And when we comb this down into natural fall with the shape we just cut, right? So see how, right, you can already tell. This side, it just kind of wants to hang a little bit heavier, and then this side actually has a bit more of a shorter kind of open to a curve around this way, right? Which is exactly what we want, okay? So I'm going to, sorry.
No, you're good, bud.
And if anyone feels like I'm working too quickly, please, in the comments section, let me know. I'm so used to talking quickly with students in class to make sure we can get a lot of information in at a short time that I sometimes don't think about slowing down and explaining things a little bit more clearly. So just let me know if you need me to explain anything, okay? So I'm trying to connect my two sides, right? So here's my length on the right side I haven't cut. Here's my length on the left side that I have cut, okay? So I'm going to gather everything cleanly, okay? And then really lightly, like you can barely even see that hair. You can probably see it more that way, but now I've created a overall line to connect into, right? So now I'm going to isolate out what I've already cut, take that same exact shape that I want to cut, and see, me cutting on a flat plane but angling it over, it has a reverse angle, right? It's more flat this way. So what I'm gonna do is using a really, really, really close stroke, got this out of the way. Right, you can see, I cut hair, but it's seriously so fine and such a clean line that I can definitely still go in through here with my razor and my comb and see a definite guideline, right? There's my guide, okay? Just like scissors, I can lift up the hair and see what I'm working from.
Beautiful.
Voila. It seems so simple. I think that the foundations, once you retain them, they help you forever. They just do.
Yeah, it's kind of the acronym KISS, right? Keep it simple, stupid. It really comes into play when you start talking about cutting hair. A lot of times people try to make things way too difficult and overstate that this is such a new technique or this is such a crazy idea. But really, if you break it down, it's still just classic geometry and classic physics based off of the hair.
Absolutely. I mean, just simple, you know? I mean, it's kind of ironic that the first new rock band to get really popular in the last 30 years sounds just like Led Zeppelin, isn't it?
You're right, yeah.
I mean, like, let's be real, you know? Because we know that Machine Gun Kelly isn't reinventing the wheel. All right, so we're gonna keep working. So we have a definite angle down this way, okay? And I'm really, really lightly notching that weight out so it's nice and soft. Because whenever I want a wispier frame around the face, the easiest way to create a wispier frame is to just really lightly take that weight out. So it's a little bit lighter on the ends, but it still is bold. It's still something I can see and I can follow and work with, okay? So I'm gonna take two bigger sections here. And Reagan's going to lean her head down because now she just gets the drill. All right. How are we doing on time?
Very good.
That's it. People start checking out when it's too long.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. We do once a month in our education program. We gather all the students together. So Ben Michael's departmentalized, which I know that it seems to be a huge divisive line nowadays. It wasn't for a long time, but it seems like now a lot of students don't like being prevented from doing both, right? Which I get that, especially when you're fresh out of hair school and you want to exercise all artistic freedom possible. But I will say, I've never been to an ear, nose, and throat doctor to have my heart checked. He just wouldn't do it because he knows a little bit about it because he went to medical school, but he specializes in ear, nose, and throat, right? So when I talk to people about the importance of learning departmentalization when they're going into hair cutting, it's because it teaches you to be the best in one element of your craft. I do think it's important to not limit yourself when you're developing, but that's my rant on that. And we get our color and our cut students together one Monday a month, and we showed both students a demo from each perspective. And I noticed, especially with the color students, if I spend longer than 45 minutes doing my haircut, they're just checked out. So I always try to think in terms of keeping it concise and interesting for people. Okay, so now we overall have a definite shape to work from.
I'll tell you what, this is looking great. So for those of you who, a lot of people are just logging in now, you can definitely watch this. It will be posted on Hairbrained. It'll be on my Facebook page as well. This is Daniel Holzberger with Van Michael Salons, and my friend Sean Bruno here has been doing a razored bob on our lovely model Reagan. Reagan came in with a very square, long bob shape, and now she's got quite a bit more of an A-line shape with a lot of internal movement, internal layering, internal graduation, and all of it is really come together beautifully with Sean's cut. And it looks like we're just starting to wrap up now.
We are. So now I'm combing down and I'm checking for balance, which we should always do. It doesn't matter whether we're cutting a live model or whether we're cutting a client. We should always check for balance, okay? This is visible here. It is. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to check through here. Yep. And her part, she parts in the center, but this is where it's important to still work with what the hair wants to do, right? The natural part of the hair for Reagan is center-ish. It's literally just off to the right of the center. So if I would have done this whole precise frame in the front, based very much on the center part, the second that she moves her hair around, it's gonna fall back into natural fall, right? So I still parted it based on her natural center part, if that makes sense. Okay. And I'm actually going to really softly, like I see just a little bit of excess weight through here that I don't like. So I'm going to really lightly channel that to open that up a little bit in the corner, right? Just a tiny bit. So see how dense this is? So think of it like texturizing. Texturizing properly, you're turning this part of the hair into this part. Fine teeth to wide teeth. Same thing here. I want to see my shape. I'm just trying to turn the fine teeth a little bit more into the wide teeth, if that makes sense. So there's hair coming out, but I still have a very defined section of hair.
It looks great.
Okay. Same thing here. This side, the weight is a little bit less prominent, but I still see a tiny bit here. All right, cool. Yeah, boom. Okay, cool. Cool. So, style, right? How would we style this, okay? I know everyone has their different techniques for styling hair. Do we want to have time to go over? Do you want to